We're live.
We are live. Good evening and welcome to the Mahone Bay Town Council regular meeting, the first meeting for November. We have all of our members of council and some staff here with us in the chamber. For those of you who may be joining us on YouTube, I would remind you that if you have questions, you can send them in at the end of the meeting. Before we go into an in-camera session, you will have an opportunity to address a question to council on any topic that is discussed this evening. And we have some citizens here in chamber with us, and they of course would have the same opportunity to ask a question if they would choose to. So we'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered again tonight in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. Council, you have an agenda, but before I would ask you to indicate your approval of it, I would note that there's going to be an additional item in the in-camera session. It's a personnel item in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, section 2210.3. I'm sorry, 22.2C on personnel matters. So entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Feeney. Councillor Now seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the special meeting of the 21st of October.
I move that the minutes of October 21st, 2022 be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Now the regular meeting of October 27th.
Move that be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. You've heard the motion. On that question, all in favor? Thank you. We did have a presentation scheduled with Ramsey Duff, who was going to give us an update on the nursing home build, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he was not able to attend tonight. So he will be contacting staff and we'll reschedule that hopefully in the very near future. Okay, correspondence, we have no action items. We do have 5 information items. Councillor Kirby.
There is one item, number 5.3 in the information items that I think could be considered an action item. And it's the item about identifying members of town staff who might be nominated for the Queen's Jubilee Medal. And in some correspondence yesterday, the CAO suggested 3 different possibilities, and I would like to move that council asks staff to put forward 2 names of candidates to receive the Queen's Jubilee Medal,
That's right.
Platinum Jubilee Medal.
Yeah.
Staff would appoint the 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would appoint them or they would
But
each
put
get
forward the
one.
names. Put forward the
Put
names.
forward 2 names each.
Okay, do we have a seconder for Councillor Carver's motion? Councillor Feeney seconds it.
I'm sorry, for the minutes, I don't understand exactly. Is it putting forward 2 names to then come to council, or staff are gonna put in 2 names. Okay, thank you.
That was my intent, yeah.
Each staff member, is that what you mean, Penny?
All staff will be canvassed to provide 2 names. And whoever gets nominated most frequently becomes the winner.
No, of the 3 options that were put forward, one of them was that. But the one that I just put forward was that staff, i.e. CAO.
No. Staff.
The suggestion was that the CAO put forward the names of 2 longest serving current employees for nomination. Maybe I could rephrase the whole motion.
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Well, there's an invitation to submit nominations.
Yeah.
All we're really suggesting is that we submit some nominations.
Staff.
Yeah, leave it in the CAO's capable hands to submit some nominations as per the invitation.
Thank you.
Okay, is it nominations or is it by longest serving staff member?
We've been invited to submit nominations. I don't think there's any, leave it in the CAO's hands on the criteria on the most deserving applicants, but I do think there's some level of time sensitivity.
I believe so, and I apologize for my clumsily worded motion, but that was the intent. And this CAO wishes to speak.
CAO?
Just just to clarify that, so that the notion if staff are directed, if I'm directed to submit 2 names, I had indicated to council by email that the fair method of selecting those names was longest service with the town. So the motion doesn't, I believe, doesn't include that, but for everyone's information, I had indicated that if the decision were to be, that is the method that I would use to make the decision.
Okay. So the motion is that the CAO will identify 2 persons.
I could withdraw my motion, my poorly worded motion, and try again.
Seconder, do we agree?
Sure. Please.
So I move that council ask staff, the CAO, to put forward the names of the 2 longest serving current employees for nomination for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal.
Okay. You're happy with that, seconder? You've heard the revised motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, what would you like to do with the rest of the information items?
Move to receive and file the remaining items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.4.
Okay. Seconded? On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. So that goes to file. Now, the moment you've been waiting for since you got this agenda, staff report to council.
Mayor, I had a couple questions that I passed along to the CAO. He did respond with some answers, but I'll just briefly, for everyone else's benefit, just briefly re-ask them, and Dylan can hit the highlights. But I have a question about the status of item 10, of which Dylan responded to. I'm not sure what else needs to be said other than it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just highlight that it will be something that will require a solution with MODL's participation. And hopefully we'll get, some good advice from legal counsels on both sides and be able to come up with something that will work. It's not as if it's an unprecedented situation. There are other pieces of property that straddle municipal boundaries. So yes, it is in progress.
And the reason I asked was we're just crossing through like October. So I just thought that was worthy of discussion. The other item I asked about was was item 21 and 22. And again, similar response from the CAO. It's still under discussion. So those are my questions, and thank you very much, Dylan, for the responses.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Wilson, you look like you have a question.
No,
No?
thank you.
Councilor Carver? Okay,
Mayor, I'd move that we receive, received the council report,
for
or we
information.
accept the council report for
For information.
information. Thank you.
Okay,
Second that.
seconded by Councilor Carver. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Item 6.2, the appointment of the fire inspector. Councilor Now.
I would move that Brendan Mosier be appointed as a fire inspector effective November 14th, 2022, and until such time as that appointment is removed.
Thank you. Seconded by the deputy mayor. All in favor? Mother on the question, all in favor? Sorry. Motion is carried. Let's go to fire station signage.
If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I'll just briefly introduce this very, I think, to the point request here from the fire chief. There's a depiction of proposed signage. We did have the opportunity to get a quotation to confirm relative costs, but obviously this was not something that we had included in the building plans. And I think, you know, maybe just an oversight all around, because there is a nice opportunity to put some signage up on the front of the building facing Hawthorne. So the project is officially done, meaning this would not be considered to be part of the building project.
Mhm.
But I think if, you know, if approved, it would be something that we would just go ahead and complete over the annual budget and see, you know, where things fall. It's an amount of money that exceeds their capitalization threshold, but really it's, you know, I would see it as work on the existing building at this point. So there's a recommendation there, if anyone would choose to make that motion, and I'll take questions.
I move that council approve the request signage for the new fire station.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Now. On the
I'm
question?
looking at it, that was a very bare spot up above the doors there. And so we had our photos taken for a contest that was put on by one of the insurance companies,
Yes.
and we just took and put that signage in there. Even though it's not there, we pasted it in for the
Oh,
photo.
yeah.
Good.
You
It looks-
should,
it looks
you
good.
should add a brand new pumper and a 6-page picture too.
Well, we're
We'll send that to the insurance company.
Anything else on the question? It may be one of those we don't know, but we don't know situations, but are there other things that we expect were overlooked in the building that we may have to address as a non-project budget item?
I'm sure there are. I don't know right off the top of my head what they are, but I know we have discussed certain things that are, you know,
Would come,
should have been there, but aren't, and I don't think they're in the original proposals, so.
okay,
Yeah, I think probably throughout the year, there will be some updates. I think they'll mostly be within the operating budget, but, you know, if there are any capital items, we would.
Well, one thing we did notice is that in our kitchen, I mentioned before, during the build time, that there's not very many power outlets within the kitchen. And the ones that are there, because when I mentioned it, the guy said, well, we don't need them. I said, well, we do need some. And he said, well, any that go in there will be the double, you know, each one will be double. Because they have to be separated. And the ones that are in there aren't, because if you plug two things into the one outlet, you're blowing your.
those
circuit. So
kitchens put them on separate
Well,
circuits.
They have to, yeah, and
Two
by
halves of the
building
plug.
code, I think they have to be on separate circuits.
Yeah.
Richard, is this something to your knowledge that's been brought to Jonathan's attention?
I don't know if it's been Johnson's attention. I know it's brought to Vigilance attention during the preliminary parts of it and during the build. And they're the ones that said that, you know, it's not required for its commercial kitchen, but you still have to plug in hand things. You still have to put in, you know,
Certainly
different
the
things.
number of outlets I understand was raised
Yeah.
earlier. I mean, the fact that if you plug two things into the outlet.
Well,
there's a short.
I don't know if that was brought to Johnson's attention or not. I really don't know.
I will bring it to.
I know
that one sounds like.
I know at that time Vigilance said that by code, they have to be separated
Separate
Each
circuit.
one separate circuits, each, for the two different plugs, so, which they aren't, so therefore, actually, it's not up to code, so.
Yeah, so if that is the case, and I mean, it passed its inspection, so I expect that that's not the case, but if there is a defect like that, we've got to bring it to Jonathan.
Yeah, like I say, I don't know,
I'll do it.
Okay,
I just want to always reiterate that, you know, if there are
Yeah,
deficiencies.
yeah, I know that, the chief was gonna bring some of those things up to John's attention, I don't know which ones he brought up or not.
Thank you.
okay, we still have the motion on the floor. All in favor? Motion is carried, thank you. Let's move on to the snow and ice control policy. We had this at a recent meeting. There was some discussion, took it away and made some changes. CAO?
So, yeah, there were just two small changes made based on council's discussion at the last meeting, and otherwise this was going to be carried forward to this meeting anyway, as policies always are. So the two changes that were made were highlighted in green to distinguish them from the other changes previously. One is the addition of a new sentence under 7.0 parking lots, referencing the trail parking lots that had been added by motion of council at the last meeting. And then the other is the addition of the sentence in 11.0 concerning public works avoiding covering hydrants with snow. And then I guess, I suppose under 15, there is an intended addition of the trail parking areas to the snow condition priorities, and we did have, I think, a significant discussion about where that would come in at the last meeting. So those are the additional changes, and the recommendation is still to adopt the policy as presented.
Counselor Wilson.
So moved.
Seconder,
One second.
Deputy Mayor. Thank
Question.
you. With a question, on the question,
Was just
please.
curious about Houghton Road, why it's considered a class one,
Sorry?
why Houghton Road is considered a class one road.
Oh, just because the fire station is located there.
Okay.
So now that the fire station's access is from Hawthorne, we get a class one. And they usually go up and do the loop and come back down anyway, so in that sense, I suppose it makes sense for them to.
Was it a cost factor that determined that the fire station is gonna be contracted out rather than town employees doing it, was it?
No, it was really the other way around. It was to kind of allow that to happen simultaneously with the street clearing operation. So that will be the top priority for the contractors, will be the fire station, and then come down to do the public parking areas. And it'll be a bit of an experience. So we, you know, now that we've combined the waterfront parking lots and the fire station and town facilities that have been under contract before, it's quite a bit of a larger contract. And we will need to see how this winter goes in terms of maintenance of that contract. You know, we could break it up again, but there's less and less people doing plowing these days in the area, according to Jonathan. A number of the guys have gotten out of that recently or are in the process of getting out of it. So every year, well, I guess the point is we'll look at how the contract's performance and see if there's any change that we want to recommend for the following year.
The only other question I had was in the very last line of paragraph 11. It talks about at times when fire hydrants become excessively covered with snow, thus rendering them inaccessible by fire department personnel, blah, 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 blah. I think we can eliminate the word excessive. If they are covered by snow, they need to be cleaned out because the fire department might not be able to have access to them. Do you get 2 feet of snow or 3 feet of snow? What's excessive?
What's excessive?
That word out of that particular line.
Well, I mean, it's the amended policy as amended. If the mover and seconder agree, it's an easy change.
Seconder? Okay, mover and seconder, Councillor
So
Carter.
just a question, you suggested that just removing the word
Excessive.
accessible.
Excessive,
But
no,
I think
excessive.
you'd have to remove that whole clause, thus rendering them inaccessible by fire department personnel.
No, excuse me. It's not the inaccessible word he wants removed.
It's the excessive, the word
Snow.
excessive.
Oh, excessive.
Yes,
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry about it. Excessive.
something that's not defined.
Become covered, but yes, thank you, I get that.
Okay,
And then at the same time, inaccessible, I believe should be what, all one word rather than two. words.
Yeah.
that's a.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got it as amended then. With that change in the excessively word being removed. We have a motion on the floor. Questions been called. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. The fire services bylaw.
So, Mr. Mayor, just an introduction to this one. This has been a little while in coming as the clerk has been consulting with the fire department in a number of different ways to put together this draft. We've also done really extensive research around the province at other bylaw drafts, and I know that Maureen's been in contact with the provincial office as well as a number of different other municipalities about their experience with respect to fire service bylaws. And at the end, it's a fairly condensed, discrete bylaw. I think it's pretty tight and does its job. So we are at this point recommending that council direct staff to coordinate with the fire chief to present the draft bylaws to the fire department to obtain specific stakeholder feedback to be presented back to council at the November 24th regular council meeting. And obviously, you council members might wonder why this step wouldn't proceed bringing it to you. We're not asking you to talk about it. We're asking you to tell us to go talk to the fire department about it. Obviously, that is because it would be the draft that has been presented to council. And it would be appropriate for council, of course, to first review any draft of the bylaw that we were going to take out for consultation. I understand the fire department's regular meeting for the month will fall between now and the 24th. So it would be our intention, and I think Noah's already spoken with the fire chief, for this to be presented to the department's regular monthly meeting for November. And further, we recommend that council would direct staff to add consideration of first reading to the draft fire services bylaw agenda to the November 24th regular meeting. Pending that feedback from the department.
Councilor now.
I think it's moving a little too fast. We have our meeting next Tuesday night, but we're not gonna have, the membership's not gonna have a chance to review this and give their feedback on it within that 1-2 hour meeting. So I think we should be, I think bringing it to the 24th of November meeting is a bit excessive and and just pushing us along. I think we should be giving them more time than that. I mean, they're volunteers and they have to have a chance to look at it. I mean, it takes a bit of time to go through it and do it justice on what it's actually saying. So I think the 24th is too fast.
Councilor Finn.
Mayor, just had a couple of thoughts at first. I think this is terrific progress. I can remember the first time we were at the fire department with the deputy CAO and yourself and other councilors, Councilor Carver and others around the table. And I mean, it was just, the idea was just in its infancy. And I don't even believe, if even the fire hall had been broken ground yet. So this has been developed for a while. A couple of things. One, at the meeting of the Maiders Cove Fire Commission, that's chaired by Mary Ann Hiltz and Ian Creaser and Mrs. Wenzel and Mr. Eunice and others. There were a couple things that they identified that were of particular concern to them. One was a minimum contingent of firemen and fire department members, which I think we're well ahead of. Two, information reports periodically on about mean response time, which we're, I believe, quite compliant with now, and we get regular reports. But the other issue was documentation of training, which senior members of the department have which credentials, and do we have that documented? And for newer firefighters, are their trainings recorded in a manner that the town could produce them on demand? And in the event that you were required to, based on for whatever reason, something happened and we were required to say, these 12 firefighters have these credentials. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we should think about. I think about to codify inside the policy. The other item is about, as I understand it, and I'm certainly no expert, the fire department has, they have their own bylaws, which I would call as more like regulations, internal regulations. So regulations that they think are the rules within the fire department. And it strikes me that on the items where we talk about adjudicating codes of conduct, we really need to ensure that the rules, like they link up somehow, so that whatever is in the town bylaw also has to be in the fire department bylaw. And because it doesn't make any sense for the firefighters to think that the adjudication is by one process and the town thinks the adjudication is by another. So I think they have a document and a committee that's working on reviewing it. It's 30, 40 pages long, I'm sure. I just think there needs to be a process where and I think the motion does this, we get back together with the fire department, we go through the draft. But then the fire department also has to make a lot of edits to their internal documentation to align with the bylaw. And I just think that's going to take I think that might take a little longer than November 14th. Like maybe it can be resolved by January 14th or maybe even December 14th, or pardon me, 24th. But it might be a bit of a squeeze. Anyway, I know other than that, Maureen, I think this is excellent progress.
Deputy CAO, and then we'll go to the CAO.
Probably say the same thing, but
Possibly different. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to speak to about the comments you brought from the Mayor's Cove Commission meeting. Documentation about training. I really want to look into that about what is considered, what could be shared, rather than Maureen Hughes has this training, we have
Yeah.
3 firefighters with this training and that sort of thing. The other thing is I'm a little bit, I'd caution that we'd have to be careful in how we present that. Nova Scotia does not have a standard of training. So, and this is one of those things, and all the many people I have spoken to about training in the province and insurance and whatever, what it ends up being is sort of a local standard. So is, where there is no provincial standard, the comparison is then, how do you compare to others in the area? Well, like what could, that's wording, what could be reasonably expected and assumed and that sort of thing. So certainly we've had a lot of conversations with the chief about record keeping, and I know he's done a lot of work. You can see it in how quickly that quarterly report comes back. And I realize it's an anecdotal example, but it is huge. I can tell in the background, they're doing a lot of work about record keeping. So I can look into that. The other one too, I have had a look at the fire department bylaws. And I think a lot of it, now there is a note in here where this specifically says about the code of conduct. I'm suggesting we want to be able to say we have that code of conduct, so that I think that's the one that really lines up. The rest of it, and certainly take your point about having a discussion, but in advance of that discussion, I do want to propose that we keep a bit of an open mind, because we're looking at an overall bylaw, and then, we set certain standards, and then within that bylaw, there's a thing that says that the chief would be enabled to create committees and subcommittees or whatever. Again, as Councillor now mentioned a little while ago, these are all volunteers, that sort of thing. So I think when we look at a bylaw, a town bylaw, we need to look at it as an overarching, these are some of the larger points. And then I believe there's space within there. I agree with you, they refer to them as bylaws, but for our purposes, they're more of a standard operating procedures or
Right.
policies or internal policies or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there can be a lot of difference in there, as long as we've got things like the code of conduct and have some things like that. If they have, one of the questions we were asked by email today was things like minimum requirements to show up to calls and training and that kind of thing. They, I believe, have to have the flexibility to set those based on who they have, what their circumstances are, they have to have the flexibility to change those. So I definitely take your point, but before we go into that, I do want to just make that suggestion that council keep in mind that this is an overarching bylaw, and that there will be things within the department about how they do that. And if you think about it, council doesn't care whether I take my lunch at 12 or 1 and Kelly takes her lunch at 12 or 1, right? We want to make sure that we have this kind of staffing availability. We need to allow for that kind of flexibility, I believe. So just as we go into it.
Good, thank you, Mo, that's helpful.
CAO and then Councillor Carter.
So, Mo, all that being said, you're not tooting your own horn enough because you already did do all the things you asked for. So,
Fair enough.
4.5H specifies the chief shall provide an annual public report to council on the efficiency of the department training of membership and condition of buildings, apparatus, and equipment under the stewardship of the department. So there's an expectation there that the chief will provide a public report on the very things that were cited by Mater's Cove. That clause is almost a direct response to Mater's Cove saying, we'd love to see an annual report that includes these
Yeah.
things. So that is in there. It leaves the chief with some discretion about how. So to Maureen's point, like, how does he describe the training? You know, if there isn't an objective standard of training, but certainly whatever is worked out, there will be an annual report. So, you know, that is understood in there.
Mhm.
Similarly, Mo, you know, mentioned that there's a section highlighting saying, you know, members are required to swear and affirm and uphold the code of ethics of the department, but we're not prescribing the code of ethics of the department. It is an appendix to this document, and that's highlighted in there, of course. And then, you know, Mo, the last thing you said about the chief essentially having the authority under this bylaw to have any kind of operating procedures as needed. Like, there's a number of clauses that, as you say, grant them the not only ability to form committees within the department, but there's a specific requirement placed by the bylaw on the chief to ensure that internal procedures are in place to ensure qualifications, expectations, opportunities for members are handled in an equitable manner, to periodically review the policies and procedures of the department, participate in the development of new general operating guidelines, procedures, and policies as required. So, you know, really, this is the groundwork, the base level on which the department can build their internal processes. And if that's something that won't happen before this bylaw is approved, it'll happen attendant to the approval of the bylaw, and will probably take a while for them to work their way through. But, you know, if anything, this is helpful because it provides very clear and concise guidelines within which to operate. So yeah, I think just to your points, Joe, I do think this draft really does, I mean, it does comprehensively address those points.
Okay,
Sorry,
Councillor Carter, next, Councillor Green, then Deputy Mayor, and then yourself.
I'd just like to pick up the theme of the time frame that has been proposed. And I wonder about why rush it, given that it's such, it's a major step. And it's been a long time coming. I remember sitting in the gallery in 2008 when the the insurers gave their report. And the things that they were recommending, how many years ago was that? 14 years ago.
14 years ago. Got a copy of it home.
Yeah, me too. Are coming to fruition now, that all this time later, and it's taken all that time and the care and the thoughtfulness to be putting these things, codifying them in a way that everybody can be proud about. Because I do believe that having this bylaw in place, while it represents a huge change in the way that the relationship, the fire department and the town, it's a huge change. And that's going to take time to process that change. I mean, we've been thinking about it for a long time, so, but not everybody has. And so they need time to get their heads around it and what it represents to them personally and as a department. And I don't know why we need to rush it. I think we need to give ourselves and the fire department time to do it well and with a lot of trust that it's going to be good for everybody.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carter. Did you want to?
No, I can get on, I just want to get on the end of
Deputy
the.
Mayor is next.
Yeah, I guess just to echo what Councillor Carver was saying, I think from a process perspective, dealing with volunteers who in many ways sacrifice a lot of their time to do what they do, and we would not want them to feel that the town is infringing on what previously was a way of life that they had, and this is sort of coming to put some shackles in that. I think it's been characterized very well that it's a helpful codification of how things can work very smoothly. But I know anytime that you introduce any paperwork, any policy, that process can go pretty wrong if you rush it. And if there isn't a lot of thought put towards the process and how people take it in. And so I, sent a couple of emails and some highlights of things that maybe we don't want to rush too much, give them time to have soak time on the document, have them have enough time to feel that they've been heard, questions have been asked and they've been answered. And before we even come to the table, that at least every kink that could be in there is ironed out properly. I think they need that. So if we can't do that based on I think, like you said, it's been quite a long time for this coming. If we can do that, I think we should. It'll be a very good move for that part.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Feeney.
I think that was a comprehensive discussion, Mayor. I guess I'm thinking about the two recommended motions. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense just for us to approve the first motion, but without the date, and to kind of await staff's feedback about how that engagement and stakeholder feedback from the fire department goes between now and November 24th. I know that I believe the department's having their change of leadership or in January. But if this doesn't get actually through second reading and until February, like, is that, I don't see a downside.
It's not crucial.
I don't think, as long as everybody agrees. So I don't think there's any rush. So if everybody's okay with that, why don't we just do that? Why don't we just go with the fee? Are you, Dylan, is there a virtue to the timeline?
No, when my speaking turn came after yours, I was just gonna suggest you stop at the part of the sentence where it says at, and then just, you could just do the first motion minus that, which I think is exactly what you're saying. So it'd just be that feedback we presented to council, and then just don't have the at November 24th.
Okay.
So, Mayor, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Yes, please.
One quick question, well, I'll second it first.
You'll second, okay.
No,
Now we'll go to the question.
I'm assuming once the fire department has discussed this and that everything, there's gonna be a meeting between the fire department and town staff. And I'm just wondering, would it be any option? I think that if we have that meeting for discussion of this bylaw, I think council should be involved in that also. Because they can hear directly from the fire department what their feelings are.
So I've been speaking with the chief and I've spoken with him a lot going back and forth, and this was definitely one of those things that Dylan and I were arguing about commas and grammar and stuff up to the last minute when the agenda went out last week. And I think I spoke with Chief Eakins 2 or 3 times that afternoon and sent him an email of actually the full staff report because it included everything, and actually gave him a paper copy that evening. I spoke to him leading up to this being the public package being published, to say that I'd be available to speak with him, speak with the department, speak, whatever. And we spoke again a couple of times today about it. And he and I are going to find a time to meet because he's getting questions. And we're going to find a time now that he's had a chance to read it a bit and go through it a bit. We're going to sit down and, behind a closed door and, post-its and highlighters and whatever. And I've said the same thing, that I can be available to him, to the department, to a meeting, whatever. So I realize that's only part of what you were suggesting, but I did want to make it clear that we've had this discussion a few times and The offer has been made for whatever works best for the fire department, and that could be a couple of different things. If people want to talk about it amongst themselves, talk about it as a large group, and then have someone, and so that's been the conversation thus far.
But I mean, and also to Richard's point, though, I don't think the department will object to council.
Oh, they wouldn't.
Joining Maureen and attending the meeting on the next regular meeting of the department to present on it.
Well, I'd say, I think, and Maureen hit onto it there, I think at the one point, that the fire department should have time to go over this themselves, to discuss points that are in it, so that they have, it's no good for Maureen to meet with the whole department when we haven't seen it. And we don't know what we're gonna discuss, because it'll just be tying up time for naught. If the fire department has time to discuss it themselves and make out what points they wanna make, so like that, and then meet with Maureen and or council or whomever to discuss further, then that's great. I think the fire department should have time to discuss this amongst themselves first.
If I may, and that's always been the approach, is that we would, myself, I've been the one speaking to the department up till now, but certainly whoever would be available as it best works with the department's approach. The comments that have been made here, this is a department, it's an entity of itself in the way they function together. So, however that works best for the department, then the staff will be available.
So, yeah, I'm also a little bit confused now, but.
Picking up on Councillor Now's suggestion that council be involved in some way. And that would be an invitation from the fire department. Would that be an invitation from the fire department for members of council to be part of the discussion? How would that be?
I can't remember the last time we had sessions that I attended with you, and I don't recall if it was a thing where the fire department said if anybody wants to participate, which is a given.
We asked if they would meet with us. May I make a suggestion to this point? Either,
Before you jump in though.
Yeah.
Because the motion that's on the floor and my understanding of what present to the fire department means is that we don't go through intermediaries, that we go to their meeting and we present the bylaw, and they can take their time afterwards to talk about it as much as they want to. But surely we're still talking about presenting this to the department. I mean, that's like, I guess that seems like maybe that's not the intention here, but it certainly would be nice for you to start the wording in motion.
Just to clarify, and this is just one opinion around the table, but we do need a bylaw, and we're gonna have to have a bylaw, and we'll pass a bylaw. And that has to happen, realistically, we have to do that sometime next year at the very latest, but it might not have to be on November 28th or November 24th, but it does need to happen. So I think we're all very conscious of the fact that time is precious, and the volunteer team at the fire department needs to respond. So we'll give them that time, but at some point we'll need to move it along. So I think I'm ready to vote on this.
Can I just make one comment?
Yep.
Because I didn't share the concern about the business of council getting together with staff, because my understanding was it was a two-step process. One step is the bylaw as it is written gets presented to the fire department, presumably by you two folks. And they go away and they read it and they complain among themselves or do whatever they want to do. And then a month or 2 months from now, they pull us in and fire the questions at us. But it's a two-step affair.
That would be my understanding, yeah.
And I think that's the way it happened previously.
kind of.
When I went the last meeting, it was to hear what they were saying, what their issues were, what their concerns were. You were just in the beginning stages of developing a policy at that point.
Yeah, I was
But
just
it was
asking
their,
questions. Yeah.
it was their side that we were hearing.
Like, we don't need more than 10-15 minutes on the agenda on the 21st to present the thing. And then it's the department's prerogative how they invite the council back to hear from, what they have to say.
We
I
should,
think we start the clock by presenting it to a meeting so that it's
Yeah.
understood that now they are being asked to come back with some feedback.
But I do think there needs to be some expectations set that the municipal government does need the bylaw at some time, and that is sometime soon.
Mhm.
Like soon isn't 10 days from now, it's soon as 2 months from now. Pick a reasonable time, but inevitably we need to put this to bed.
And I think that's.
Everyone's
Everyone
satisfied.
started on a certain date, so November 21st, then that gives an indication that there's now the ball's in the court of the department to come back and.
I think that that's, reasonable enough. I think the department will have no problem with that. And I think, they don't think they have a problem with the bylaw, having a bylaw per se. There are some concerns as to what's gonna be in there, but this will should alleviate some of those concerns.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that they'll have some questions on some of the stuff that's in there. I mean, I have some questions on some of the stuff that's in here, so,
Sure.
Councillor Carver.
Before we go to a vote, does anybody know how many units in the municipal units in the province do have fire department bylaws?
And it's a really difficult question to answer because there are any number of bylaws and policies, and there are a number that have something actually called fire something bylaws, fire services, management of fire department, that sort of thing. But there is just a plethora of other policies that are related to the management of a fire department, the funds for a department, the response for a department. There is just a vast body of work out there in the province, and looks like a lot of things, which is one of the reasons we were trying to get something together that's concise and tight. And this is because there are just a huge amount.
And also, it should be noted that less than half of municipalities in Nova Scotia operate a fire department. So all the rest of them don't. And so obviously, if they do have a bylaw concerning fire services, it would be about how they fund independent departments granting for capital purchases, et cetera, which is quite a different.
The question may come up, why a bylaw, but I'm sure that you'll feel that when you meet with the department and present the draft. Are we ready to vote yet?
Yes.
Anything else on the question?
I have a question, sorry. I'm not, so the motion I have that's on the floor is that council directs staff to coordinate with the fire chief to present the draft bylaw to the fire department to obtain specific stakeholder feedback to be presented to council.
Period.
Period. The discussion that I'm hearing a couple of different things about getting this in front of the fire department, but also giving the fire department time to digest it a bit before we start looking for feedback and that sort of thing. So I'm curious that as I make my little notes about what do I do tomorrow morning, what are we hoping that happens? I will definitely be in touch with the fire chief tomorrow. That was already going to happen. Assuming he didn't just turn off his phone when he heard me say that on YouTube. My conversation with the chief was going to be, you take us to your department and then follow up with me about what you would like and what kind of timelines. We did earlier, we had a timeline, but now if we're stretching that a bit, is the ask to get on the agenda for next week, or is the ask for him to come back and say, either the agenda next week or December, or like a time to meet? What is the direction there?
Councillor Wilson.
My gut feel is that we should be asking the fire chief to have his people ready to talk to us writ large before the second council meeting in January.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of discussion here about giving them an adequate amount of time to digest,
That's reasonable.
develop their responses.
So if I'm hearing correctly, then we're just thinking about giving this the chief a copy on, assuming he has a copy anyway, and then he can take it to the fire department and then arrange a date for feedback that you get. Am I right in that?
That's what I'm hearing now.
So that,
So-
I'm
Second
gonna put a hand to
meeting.
that. because
My understanding is very different.
Okay,
That Mo should ask for a time at the next agenda to present this, and in terms of those timelines going forward, we do not even need to go into that right now.
No,
Just present them with
Just
the
present
paper.
them with the paper, tell them we need feedback, and the sooner the better, and let them have the soak time to do that, rather than, I would hesitate to put sort of timelines when it's a 14-year process. We've already started on, and now, as soon as you have the paper, you tell them, okay, 2 months, you have to bring it back to us. You've taken 14 years to develop it, right? So
I think if we,
should have come
a
back.
fair timeline of having this in place by the end of the fiscal year, then I think we're doing well.
So, I think, supporting the deputy mayor's point, the key thing is that we have a start to this that is acknowledged that, here, we brought it to the meeting, we told all of the members that the council wants to hear their feedback, and now we've left it to them to get back to the town.
Yeah.
And so, getting on the agenda for their regular meeting is an essential start of that. Better to have a start than an enforced end times. If we have a start time,
Oh, we don't want to-
there's no question that we presented it. and asked for the feedback.
So then the motion as stated without that date is valid.
Yeah, I think the motion is.
Okay.
Mhm.
So on the question, we're done. All in favor? Motion's carried.
As long as Maureen knows what she has to do.
As long as it's on the list.
Get a big cup of coffee. Okay, let's go to committee policy amendment.
All right, so this one obviously has come forward originally from the Policy and Strategy Committee to Council's last meeting. Then it transitioned from being a recommendation from the Policy and Strategy Committee at that meeting to being the second meeting at which the policy was presented at this meeting. So this memo is just intended to remind council that this is now up for approval, and the changes are included, and I think we've been over them a couple of times by now, but if anyone has any questions, happy to take them. The recommendation, of course, is to approve the amended policy as presented.
Councillor Wilson,
I'd like to make that motion.
thank you. Councillor Carver, you seconding?
I'll second it.
And on the question,
And on the question, thank you. My understanding about this, and the amendment was great. The draft was great. As far as it went, because my understanding was that we wanted to get that particular amendment through as soon as possible in order to facilitate the selection of citizen members process in the next month or so. And I understood that there were still some outstanding discussion items on the committee policy that we hadn't yet addressed. So I just wanted to be sure that that's still on the agenda for the Policy and Strategy Committee. But I support the motion.
okay, thank you. Anything else on the question, Deputy Mayor?
Just a quick clarification around 5.42. Says public member appointments will be limited to 3 consecutive terms, except where otherwise provided by the terms of reference. I was just wondering if it maybe I was supportive of this, but I was wondering why that exception. There's a rationale. Oh, sorry. 5.42 has an exception where it says except, as in there will be a limit of 3 consecutive terms, but except where otherwise provided by the terms of reference. And I was wondering about that exception.
So we had certain situations in mind where one of the public members is a representative for a specific interest group. So in particular, the cemetery committee with the member representing the funeral home. So we might say in the terms of reference that, that position will be exempted from the requirement for the 3 terms. And it just, if there are any like that, where the concern is that we would not have anyone where we could put in that restriction. And so we have to circle back around and amend the terms of reference, but thank you.
Councillor Feeney and then
I'm-
CA Deputy.
I'm fine, Mayor. No, that's
All right,
CA.
Councillor Carter.
I'm just wondering if it would help on that 5.4.2 to insert the word committee terms of reference.
Yeah.
Just so that it's specific to the committee. I mean, it's implied, but make it more specific.
So that's one of those ones where the mover and seconder can do the amended policy as amended, as long as Mo has caught that suggestion.
Okay,
I second
mover
it.
and seconders.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's.
anything further on the question?
Can I just make one comment?
Yes,
And this is kind of a segue, but it occurred to me that it'd be nice to have on the committee, on the strategy committees, a list of to-dos to talk a little bit about this, the schedule. Because we currently do two ad nauseum. Councilors are 4 years. So we tend to have these wholesale changes where it starts to look like an NHL hockey game. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to have council appointed for 4 years. If you're on the committee at the beginning of your term, you're going to be on it for the full term. And have citizens, non-council members appointed for 3-year terms. So there's always overlap. That's just something to think about later or not, as you choose.
Or stagger the two so that they don't line up with the municipal calendar.
Mhm, mhm.
Refer that to policy and strategy
Mhm.
for consideration. Okay. All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to area monthly solar update.
So, Mr. Mayor, these have become a standard item on our first meeting of each month agenda. If there's any questions, we either answer them or take them back to Glenda as the project manager.
Any questions?
If there are any members of the public who are curious about the status of the project, these will be in the packages and some way for people to follow along.
Just out of curiosity, clerk, how many citizens do we have watching?
8.
8? Okay. So nothing other questions on the report?
We're still waiting for confirmation of the sample solar module table or golden table, as they call it, to be able to give councilors that demo. Thought we might know by now, but there's just been a couple of delays, so still expecting later in November.
Councillor Kerr.
So just a comment, it was great to see the statement that there was lots of rain this month and that the site held up very well. And the stormwater management system directed water as designed away from the neighboring properties. So far, so good on that. That's
Sounds
good
good.
news.
The engineering work has proven effective. Anything else? No?
If I could just speak to the CAO's point about these reports being available, I just wanted to double check because a lot was going on when these reports started coming in when we were getting ready for the open house, but they are also posted on the Solar Garden page on our website.
On our website.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunity if anyone or if the public would like to see this information. They will be in the minutes of this meeting, but they'll also be on the town's website.
That's correct. They're in the public meeting package, but we are also putting the area monthly updates. This will be the 3rd one. But it's they're on the special community solar garden project page on our website. And there's a big button on our homepage to find
Say
that.
that quickly 3 times.
In the morning after that big cup of coffee.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. And let's go to special election 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is really just an update, progress of the election. Maureen and our returning officer have been making a lot of progress, getting everything ready. We do have confirmed candidates, so we're really doing it. Much as we might have hoped that it would not cost the full amount, of course, we will be doing the full thing. And as a result, there's a recommendation here, just correcting previous recommendations to appoint Maureen as the assistant returning officer for the 2022 Town of Mahone Bay special election. And we'll take any questions if there are any questions.
Make that motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, on the question, who takes on the duties that you don't do when you're doing this? And I'm saying that with a straight face, right?
Well, that's one of the reasons we got an external returning officer
Yes.
is, and why we found the woman we did, we've worked with her in the past and she can hit the ground running, bless her. But yes, it's definitely one of those things with a small staff, we shuffle around. Leah does take on the bulk of it, bulk and a half in fact, but as the clerk, I do have to have an eye on what's going on and that sort of thing. So
Okay,
all town staff, we just work faster.
Well, and further to Mo's credit, this is also a time when Maureen will be acting CAO, so a number of those duties that would have been.
acting CAO as well.
It's I'll be away during the election period, so a lot of those duties that Maureen would perform as clerk then fall to the deputy clerk. So Kelly then is, quite essential to support Maureen through that, taking on some additional duties as
So
well.
you just have a cot in your office?
Who has time to put up a cot?
So I'm curious, and I haven't asked this question before, so it's a fresh new question. Is the assistant returning officer post a paid position? Or not? I mean, I assume that the returning officer
Is
is a paid position.
Contract.
Is the assistant returning officer a paid position?
If,
It is, I don't think sure they're selling.
well, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, if we were to hire someone externally, but there's no additional payment.
So if our deputy CAO does this job, it's at no extra cost to the town.
Mhm.
I don't intend to say it that way, but that's how it's coming out. But if we hired outside our staff, it would be a paid position, we would have to pay it. So what's the advantage of, what would be the cost of hiring an assistant returning officer?
So I mean, to be frank, there has to be a connection back
Yeah.
from the contract hires to staff. So we've tried to hire the returning officer as a way to say there'll be as minimal an impact on the time that Maureen as assistant returning officer will have to put in. But that connection between the contract employee and the town, it's got to be an employee. So if we hired an external assistant and an external recruiter, then we'd have the assistant. Like it'd still have to be a staff person that was working with those individuals. And I think we could have just added more hours to Leah if that was the case.
Well, the biggest reason for this actual appointment is that if something were to happen and Leah couldn't be there, then I would fill in as the returning officer. I would be at the polls and stuff anyway, as the clerk. I would be, and I don't have to be there all day. And by that token, Leah can also go grab a sandwich on a poll day. So yes, as the clerk, this is just, if something were to happen to Leah, I'll be there anyway. This gives me the authority to act as the return officer if she couldn't be there. And it's the logical choice because I'm gonna be around anyway.
And Leah reports to you
Mhm.
otherwise, so. I mean,
And do most municipalities have an internal person acting in some role in the returning officer or during the election?
Frequently in this role. Most municipalities have an external returning officer, but then the role of the clerk depends a lot on who the external returning officer is that they have. But usually this is exactly the kind of role because there does need to be that connection with the town and specifically with the clerk, and therefore the clerk would be around for the election because the clerk is the person that then comes back and reports on the status of the election, on the results, and does that appointment or presents that person to council after the election. So this is
If
the
we didn't
role.
hire a very good returning officer, more of the work ends up being done by the staff person in the assistant returning officer role, but we have a lot of confidence in our returning officers.
Okay. So we do have a motion. Was made, you were second. Yeah. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. You now have another job. Let's go to item number 7, council items, nominating committee appointments. I think with the policy, we need 2 members of council to be appointed as
The appointees,
mm,
appointment of the appointees, the appointers.
yeah, the appointers.
Appointers,
Not really the appointed, the selectors.
the select committee.
Because council will appoint.
We have a select committee of appointers.
There you go. So do we have any volunteers? Easy now, don't. Volunteers for the job?
Excuse me, it's 2 council people and the CAO.
I believe it is, yes.
Or designate and
Yeah.
based on the timing.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, Councillor Carver has volunteered. Do we have another volunteer?
I'll do it.
Councillor Wilson. Okay, we have 2 volunteers. A motion to appoint.
Appoint the volunteer,
Yes.
appoint doors.
Councillor Feeney moves, Councillor Now seconds. Quickly, all in favor before we change their mind. Okay, so the CAO,
How long is this appointment?
as long as we need.
Until.
I think this round of appointments,
This is my 3-year thing kicking it.
Right. This is, but you can only serve on the committee 3 terms. So, yeah, you got your 12 years and you're off.
okay,
Sorry, to Councillor Carver's point, that's an excellent point, because really all of our committee appointments will roll over at the end of the calendar year. So is this an appointment for until the end of this year, until the end of 2022? Or is it
Oh,
an
no.
appointment till the end of the council
To the
term?
end of the council term.
yeah,
Or until we run out of volunteers of the year.
And then we'll have some more recommendations to make. about
there you
that.
go. Okay. All right, item number 8, committee reports, police advisory board, sorry.
Sorry, we have a motion on the table, we don't have a vote.
It did get voted on very.
Yeah.
Oh, did it?
Today's question
It was
is-
bad.
It was anonymous. Thank you. Really went quick with that. Vote was more.
Okay. Police advisory board.
Mayor,
Questions?
Mayor, I noticed there was a recommendation, or pardon me, a central motion in the minutes.
Yeah,
So with regard to the mandate of the police advisory board, I mean, I'm open-minded to vote a stop sign or a yield sign or what have you, but I'd rather have that recommendation coming from the traffic authority after it's reviewed in consultation with any other potential changes. So I have a personal opinion about whether that yield sign that's been in place for 50 years should become a stop sign and the impact it would have on traffic flow. But I would rather have an educated opinion from the traffic authority in consultation with some engineers. And I know there's a $80,000 study. So like, although I respect the opinions of the police advisory board, I do think that this matter would be better passed along to the traffic authority to weigh in on this and maybe report back to council at a future date with a report on the merits of the stop sign in that location.
so council would be directing staff to investigate or assess or.
I
What's
mean,
the word?
it's already noted there that a future report will be provided. So
Right.
I think you could say that staff are directed in the preparation of the anticipated report with recommendations for traffic measures at the intersection of Edgewater Street and Main Street to consider the police advisory committee's or advisory board's recommendation with respect to the turn lane as indicated there.
What he said.
Yeah,
Just rearrange the sentence. It's all still in the sentence.
I guess what I'm saying here, to be blunt, is I'm holding out for the deputy mayor's traffic circle with the monument in the middle. So if deferring the decision with deferring the decision on the stop sign, if that gets us closer to that, post the $80,000.
It would now be part of that.
Right. Having yet another change to stop signs, crosswalks right now, outside of the context of the authorized plan with the engineering team, I think I think we should just patiently wait and suffer through the yield for another 6 months until, anyway, that was just.
So this
One-
motion
that's
now
just-
will do that.
Well, that's just one opinion. I'm happy to hear others are on the table.
So you didn't actually make that
I-
motion of the reversed around, you just said you would like to see something like that.
I would rather defer I don't support the motion,
Okay.
cutting to the chase. I'd rather wait and have this wrapped up in the review of the whole intersection, which I think is coming next year, right?
Yes, yeah, it is, I mean, even the motion says that it would be coming. Like I said, the difference here is, are you making a motion that says that this recommendation be referred to that report when it comes? Or are you just,
Well, that would certainly.
somebody else will make a
Well, that-
motion on it?
Yeah, so that's certainly more collegial, so I think I'll do that.
Just to make the motion yourself, that this recommendation
Be
be
referred to the traffic.
staff report, that the traffic story has already been asked.
That way, right, so that's what that, in that consultation, the PAB's opinion will be duly noted.
Okay.
Fair enough.
And I must say, I like the label, the deputy mayor's traffic service.
I do too.
I will take it anytime.
Okay,
It's very unpopular, it'll be the memorial traffic.
that's right.
So part of the reason why this recommendation comes to council is the concern that as we wait for that report, there might be an accident there. And we can do something about it. And my worry would be that it would be something that has been raised by the PAB quite a few times. At least one member of the PAB has been concerned with that spot and has had close shares for a while. And for me, the stop sign, I'd probably address that slightly. Because right now, the big issue is just that even when I'm doing it, I drive here a lot. When you're taking that turn, sometimes if you're in a rush, you're just looking at vehicles. The crosswalk becomes secondary in that whole look around. I mean, I've gotten better at ensuring that I look at the crosswalk, but for new folks who haven't driven in Mahone Bay, that becomes quite a challenging spot to be. So I don't know. I would rather see the stop sign. I would support that, but I won't fight council on that motion. If council feels we can wait.
I may.
Yes, please.
I've been reluctant all along to support kind of knee-jerk reactions to one-off complaints from individuals when it comes to traffic, which is basically what this is. And I would suggest that putting a stop sign where a yield sign has been for 50 years is probably going to cause more rear enders than more problems than solved, to put it your way.
But by making it part, as you suggested, of the whole engineering study that's going to unfold, right? It's kind of taken in concert with everything else.
We've got a lot of changes on Main Street. We're talking with three-way stop at Pleasant Street. I think we made a lot of changes already. It just, the pace of the changes, I think, do matter. But, I'm open-minded with the stop sign, although I think it could cause, I'd prefer to have an engineering study that identifies the virtues of the stop sign relative to the negative impact on the folks at the teaser, as on August 12th, we have like a 12-car lineup at the stop sign. But I'm out of my depth because I'm not a traffic engineer. But if a traffic engineer says we're good to go, then I'd be more apt to say, let's do it. Versus the PAB. That's just me.
Councilor Carter.
I wouldn't be inclined to support any version of that recommendation that comes from the Police Advisory Committee. But I am curious to know what we do with a recommendation from the committee when around the table, we've already got a sense that there may not be support. So do we just ignore it? Or does have you made a motion? Have we got a motion?
No.
No, we
No,
don't.
No,
No,
you didn't get a second or anything, but Joe had
Yeah.
framed a motion that would not throw this away, would direct it into the larger study.
I'm signaling I'm not gonna support that. either.
Council's not bound to
No.
accept the
It's
recommendation.
just being collegial, to make sure the motion, the opinion gets shared with the traffic authority
Yes,
and the engineers.
yeah. Deputy Mayor.
Just a quick question around the ETA for that traffic study.
So I don't know what it actually says in the report to council, but my expectation is we'd be looking at like a late February or March presentation.
Okay.
Do you have Councillor Feeney's wording?
I have a lot of different wording. My
Pick one.
latest stab at it was the council directs staff to consider the recommendation of the police advisory board respecting the right turn onto Main Street from Edgewater Street in preparation of the anticipated future report that staff has already been asked to prepare. That's just me grabbing words as they go by.
Let
I
me
did
take a
not
stab
say-
at this.
Okay.
That council direct staff to provide the, let me just reset. Really, what do we want to do is we want to pass the recommendation to the traffic authority for
That's right.
evaluation.
We
Period.
want to make sure it's considered.
Direct staff to consider the recommendation of the PAB in the preparation of the requested report on the intersection of Main and Edgewater Streets. That's enough.
Yeah,
It's-
exactly. Never, that's right.
And then somewhere in there, there'll be a reference that this was referred, and, I mean, I already know that this is not what the recommendation of that report will be, so we'll have lots of opportunity to talk about it.
Are there any other? Are there
I
any-
don't want to go on.
But are there any-
I'm the traffic
Are
authority,
there
I
any
already
other
know.
stop signs around town, PAB, Rick gets.
No, that's one of the favorite ones. Okay, that's what you meant to say, though, wasn't it?
Word for word.
Okay, do we have a seconder, Councillor Wilson, on the question?
Mhm.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, motion's carried. Okay, let us go to the folks at home. Has anyone submitted any questions?
No, nothing.
Let's wait for a couple of minutes and give them an opportunity to let their fingers blaze across the keyboard. Councillor Wilson?
Can we just, while we're waiting, can we just accept the RCMP quarterly report as written for information?
All right, so that's motion seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to move the council direct staff to change the clock to reflect the daylight time. I looked back there and I heard it. It's not really that late. It's
Move the meeting
along. Further now.
I'm sitting there thinking, geez.
Wow.
Where did that go?
Staff would like to submit that it is 8:18 and we are just looking if there are questions from the public, so perhaps the clock should stay the way. it is.
That's right. We're here for it.
Yes.
Setting a new record.
Yeah, well,
Nothing?
No.
Okay, wait for 8:19. There we go. Okay, well, thank you to the folks at home who chose to join us tonight. And you can always, if you have a question, you can always send it in to Town Hall. And I'm sure somebody will be able to answer it for you. In the meantime, entertain a motion to go in camera. We have three items under MGA 22-2A, acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property. Under MGA 22-2E, contract negotiations, and 22-2C, personnel matter. So move. We have seconder. All in favor? Okay, we're in camera. Good night, people at home, and let's take 5 minutes.
Thank you, John Boy.
You know, there's gonna